So continuing on my trend of videos dedicated to researching and collecting Polish Mauser rifles and I guess pistols, I wanted to share some information I picked up when continuing to do some research and shopping around for a Polish Wzór or model 1929 short rifle, which is designated as the WZ-29, which we'll be using that terminology in this video. So yeah, I was looking at a different number of examples to add to my collection. I just figured I'd share some of that background knowledge with you guys. Now, as far as the background behind this rifle goes, it really is just kind of another step in the evolution of the Polish Mauser family in Polish military use, and as well as formulation into the history of the Polish Second Republic. Both of these items are really pretty much covered in my video on the Polish K98, and additionally in the earlier video on the design evolution and usage of Polish Mauser bayonets, which is covered in the linked card in the side of the video here. So be sure to check those out for more information. The WZ-29 was developed during the post-World War I trend in European nations to kind of get rid of the super long rifle as the standard military arm of their forces and adopt something a little bit handier, so a short rifle like this one. So this short rifle is intended to be the universal small arm of the Polish military. That means it's not just going to be issued to the infantry soldiers, but also for the horse-mounted cavalry troops, artillery, engineers, and other auxiliary units. The prototype of this rifle was accepted by the Polish military in the year 1929, and full production of it started taking place exclusively in Fabryka Broni in Radom from 1930 to 1939. Now, at this point in history, FB Radom really got started in 1927 and was making the Polish K98, and quickly became Poland's premier weapons factory, and eventually took over full production of rifles from Czech Vz, and so they were exclusive in making the WZ-29 rifle. So as far as production goes, the total number of these rifles that were delivered to the Polish military before the outbreak of World War II in September 1st, 1939 was just over 264,000 units. With production quantities by year shown here in the graphic, split over two screens. And as you can see, these were produced all the way up to the German and Soviet invasion. In the first couple of years, between the years 1930 and 1933, you may find earlier example of these rifles designated with a K29 on the receiver side rail. Just to clarify, these are the same rifle as the K29 designation was used from 1930 to 1933, and then WZ-29 from that point on to 1939. And I'll set this Polish rifle down and pick up an export version for this next discussion. So Poland also started selling WZ-29s as export models, which in the US, the American collectors refer to these as the WZ-29E, which the E stands for export. And as far as I know, all of the WZ-29Es were completely scrubbed of markings here on the receiver, without really sort of any markings other than the serial number on the side of the receiver and the bolt and the stock and maybe the trigger guard. And these were marked with marking of a Z inside of a circle, typically on the bolt handle and the side of the receiver as well. And that is the marking of the Polish Arms Export Syndicate, which is abbreviated as SEPEWE, which exported a large amount of these WZ-29Es to Spain during the Spanish Civil War. And the graphic shown in the screen here will outline what sort of quantities of rifles went where by the year of production. And as you can see, Poland sent some rifles to Spain off the books by officially indicating that they were sent to other countries like, China, Mexico, Greece, Peru. But in reality, they were sold discreetly to Spain to support the Republicans during the Spanish Civil War. Now, as far as service history of these rifles goes, these were used, of course, by the Polish Armed Forces from the year 1930 up to 1939, facing off against the Nazis and the Soviets during the combined operation in Poland, taking over the country rather quickly. So following the surrender of the Polish nation and the capture of any sort of Polish equipment by the Germans, a lot of these ended up getting reworked and reissued by the Germans to second-line troops, or parts were cannibalized to make an entirely different kind of K98K family style of rifle, which we'll cover in a later segment of this video. Otherwise, these have been used by the Spanish Republican forces during the Spanish Civil War against the fascist forces of Franco. Now, compared to a lot of other antiquated firearms that I've seen in use by the Republicans at that time, that I guess like other countries sold to Spain as they were just clearing their warehouses full of, junk rifles that they had, I would imagine that a Spanish Republican fighter would have been pleased to be issued one of these rifles in comparison.
So next I want to point out some of the major design features to look out for in a WZ-29 example in case you run into one at a gun shop or a gun show, to make sure you aren't looking at a butchered example or a misidentified rifle, which has happened from time to time. You'll find the national crest on the receiver with FB Radom on top and the year of manufacture, unless it's a scrubbed receiver model. And notice that this is a large ring receiver, stronger than that of the K98-29 1898, commonly called the Polish K98 in the US, that came before it. The front sight will have ear protectors that project off the sides. That's similar to that of World War I era German K98A or Polish K98. The rear sight assembly is going to be similar to that of a German K98A or a Polish K98. The rifle will have a bolt stop with a riveted ejector spring that looks like a just kind of like a dished out portion at the edge of it, as shown here. The buttstock of the rifle will have a takedown disc, a sling bar for a side-mounted sling, and an underside sling swivel. The buttstock for these rifles can be found in two variations. There can be one with a single-piece stock, as well as one with a two-piece stock. That means it's two pieces that are dovetailed together. Also, Polish stocks will have reinforcement wood dowels located in the trigger guard area, and several in the handguard to reinforce the weaker beechwood. Stocks will have a cutout similar to that of a K98A or a K98K, despite having straight bolts. Sling swivels will be on the side and the underside of the rear barrel band, as well as a slotted screw retaining the rear barrel band in place. There is a spring mounted to the stock which retains the front barrel band. Now, I have encountered two types of Polish mark bolts with these rifles. One is similar to that of marking style of the German bolts with serial numbers on the stem base, and a Polish eagle and proof marks on the other side near the stem. The other type encountered has serial numbers on the stem itself, going lengthwise with a Polish eagle on the bolt knob. and Lucky Charm proof marks on the other side. Model designation will be found on the side rail of the receiver, either being WZ29 or K29 depending on the year of manufacture. And you will find very small Polish Eagle acceptance proof marks on the right side of the receiver and the barrel. The WZ29 design shares some aspects with the Czech Vz24, which can make them tough to tell apart from far away for an inexperienced collector. I don't have a VZ24 for comparison, but I will throw up some photos based on what component I am describing. Now, the VZ24 has a side sling swivel lug in the wrist of the stock that looks similar to a recoil lug on the other side. There's a different configuration front sight, where the VZ24 has a different kind of blockier style of sight protector. The VZ24 has a recoil lug with a dished in profile rather than a flat one, and obviously the receiver markings will differ. The VZ24 has a different shaped handguard cutout and profile for the rear sight, and the rear sight has a rather large retaining screw in front. There is a difference in the design of the trigger guard profile, as the Polish trigger guard is more of an oval-shaped figure, while the VZ24 looks more like a Gewehr 98 or a K98K type trigger guard. And note that there are no wood dowel reinforcements in the handguard or the stock of the VZ24.
So there are 6 typical variants that you'll encounter when collecting and doing research on WZ29 short rifles. And I'm going to list these kind of in an order from most common and least expensive all the way up to the rare and more expensive varieties. And I'll share with you the versions that I have collected here, from my collection, and if there's anything that I'm missing, I'll just try to supplement with photos for, examples that I don't have just because they're so rare or they're way out of my budget. So starting at the bottom, the first variant that I want to discuss here is the Spanish Civil War scrubbed receiver export variant, known as the WZ29E, E for expert, as mentioned earlier. So these were either specialty made, purpose-built WZ29 rifles for export, or they were worn out ex-Polish military receivers that had their national crest and FB Radom and date markings scrubbed and sent out for export. So the WZ29E export models, they typically have E suffix in their serial number to stand for the export variation. For the most part, I've seen these rifles with matching serial numbers, with the serial numbers being over here on the stock, the receiver, on the bolt handle stem, and the trigger guard, although sometimes the trigger guard serial number is not always present. And instead of a national crest, it's obviously blank on the receiver. There is a Z with the circle located on the bolt handle knob over here and on the right side of the receiver. And once again, that is the marking of the Polish Arms export syndicate. And that's not to be confused with the Czech marking, which is very similar, and I'll put up a picture here of what that one looks like. So thousands of these were exported into the US in the 1950s and 1960s by Inner Arms. I think a lot of these were kind of cleaned up, re-blued, had their stocks I guess beautified, I guess you could say, and lacquered up to make them appealing to American collectors. And then they will also have an import mark over here on the close to the muzzle on the end of the barrel, and in this case this one is over here on the in between the barrel band kind of bands. Additionally, I have seen some of these where On the stock there is, it would be on the right hand side of the stock. There would be a MP8 flaming bomb mark. I'm assuming that that is some sort of a Spanish rework marking, always done post-war. So, these rifles aren't bad. They make for great shooters. Obviously, the missing crest is a bit of a downer, but if you don't have a lot of money, these are kind of like a good stopgap for building up a collection. Alright, so next on our list are the rework versions of the WZ-29 that maintain the Polish crest, but obviously they aren't in the original Polish configuration. So that encapsulates the Spanish rework, which is this one here, and the I guess you could call it a German rework over here.
Now, the theory behind the Spanish rework of the Polish crested WZ-29s is that some crested Polish Mausers were included in shipment to the Spanish Republicans during the Spanish Civil War at various stages when production of the WZ-29E export variants did not meet the requested quota for the Spanish Republican forces. Likely these were worn out earlier examples of ex-Polish military rifles, and after the defeat of the Republicans at the conclusion of the Spanish Civil War, many WZ-29Es and the occasional crested WZ-29s were captured by the fascists and refurbished and re-arsenaled in Spain, and likely were just kept in storage after that point.
So I'll start off with discussing the Spanish rework here. So this is a 1931, obviously FB-Radom. Obviously, since it's a 1931, it would be designated with the K29 over here on the side rail. So these are a little harder to categorize because with Spanish reworks, it's kind of like a Wild West. They kind of did whatever the hell they wanted to, and there's not really a good rhyme or reason to what they did. So you'll kind of notice when taking a look at this that obviously the receiver and the barrel look re-blued, as well as many of the parts. Serial numbers do not match. There's some odd mixes here where we have a Polish K98 bolt ejector. And let's see, what else do we have here? Oh yeah, so the original Polish serial number was scrubbed and replaced with a crudely stamped Spanish serial number. And what's interesting is the Polish acceptance marks, the little Polish eagles that are over here on the side of the receiver and the barrel, they were partially scrubbed. If I shine the light just the right way, I can still see them. So I thought that was kind of neat. Let's see, it comes with a matching Polish bolt, which obviously doesn't match the rest of the rifle. And curiously though, this is not import marked, so this must have been something that was brought in earlier on in, let's say, the 1950s, before that stamping was required. Alright, for the German reworks, I think I'll talk about them a little bit first before discussing this rifle. So the German reworks are a little bit easier to categorize, as they're a little bit easier to spot. So once again, these are all made out of captured Polish rifles after the September campaign, 1939, and they were issued to second line troops because, although the WZ-29 was a 8mm, large ring receiver kind of style of rifle, it just wasn't a K98K made by the Germans, so it wasn't seen as, it was seen as substandard basically. So what you'll see a lot of times with the German reworks is the undersling swivels will be removed and ground off. You'll see parts that are force matched if they weren't matching to begin with. You'll see parts that were in the white being blued. You'll see that the Germans serialized parts that the Polish typically didn't. So I've seen sometimes the barrel band, the front two barrel bands serialized, as well as the trigger guard and floor plate in cases. Oh yeah, stocks, typically they, if they are reworked, you'll see that they have Waffenamps, and I think you'll see something like a D in like a hexagon or an octagon in various places. So yeah, that's kind of the defining hallmarks. Now, specifically with this one here, this is a 1935 receiver. It's got a whole mix of different parts with it. The bolt body is made out of German parts made in the Radom factory, because I see the Waffenamt over 77. Same thing with the trigger guard and the floor plate, as well as the trigger itself. Curiously, the front sight is from a World War I Imperial German K98A. And oh yeah, easy thing to spot is the receiver lip that retains the handguard that's been ground off. I don't know, maybe to make this thing emulate a K98K style of rifle, but unfortunately that means that the handguard fits on there a little bit loose and slides around a bit. And I don't see any depot marks on this thing, but I think it's sufficient to say that with the Radom German occupation parts and some Imperial German parts, this may be a German rework. If anyone knows something a little bit more in depth about what this could possibly be, please let me know in the comments. Okay, now we're getting to the desirable stuff. So this next category is going to be the rifles that are in the original Polish configuration. Generally what you'll want is something that is going to be all matching with, you know, Polish stamps and everything like that. So you know, there's really not that much additional to say beyond what we've already talked about in terms of design features, but I'll just kind of reiterate some of the hallmarks to be looking out for a original Polish configuration one. So the stock should have acceptance proof marks over here on the right side of the buttstock. There should be a eagle proof mark over here on the bottom of the semi-pistol grip. So some of these Polish configuration rifles will have serialized trigger guards and floor plates. This one, I guess maybe because it's an earlier one, this is a 1934 iteration. It does not have any serial numbers. When you guys are looking at this video and looking at this rifle, I know you guys are already kind of screaming and typing away in the comments that, oh, this has been refinished, it's been sporterized or something like that. Yes, and I'll kind of get to that here. This is actually a Polish configuration WZ-29 that I was able to afford because I got it for a ridiculously good deal. And the reason being is it was heavily sporterized. It was drilled and tapped for a scope. As you can see, the stock has been sanded over here in places to make it a hunting rifle. The previous owner bent the bolt and swept it back a little bit and expanded out this cutout over here. Also the receiver and all the exposed metal parts were basically like in the white. So I kind of thought about it and said to myself, well, you know, this thing looks pretty sad, and I got it for, you know, $200. I'll just put it out that way. I contacted a gunsmith who was able to fill the holes, and he was able to blue everything for a really good price. And with all that work kind of put into this thing, it looks really nice. You know, if I ever sell this, which I probably won't, I will have to disclose that it has been refinished. But I mean, even with all that work that I put into this thing, it's still a fraction of what a nice minty example of one of these rifles is worth. So I'm very pleased to have this in my collection, and eventually one day I'll find a gunsmith who will I guess have the experience to straighten out this bolt without having it snap due to working it too much. So that'll be a project for the future. Alright, now you might be saying to yourself, well, why am I holding up this rifle? This is not a WZ-29. This is a Polish K98, covered in previous video of mine. Well, actually there was a very short-lived rework project undertaken by Poland from the years 1929 to 1933, I believe, where they took some leftover small ring K98 rifles and they converted them into a WZ-29 pattern stock and hardware configuration, which required some reworking of the receiver to allow that to fit into the large ring Mauser style stock and configuration of the WZ-29, and some other small fixes to make it a little bit more compatible. However, since these rifles were kind of a hodgepodge mix of leftover Polish K98 and even still some leftover Imperial German Kar98A parts, they were running out of stock, and soon it was determined that this kind of rework was not cost effective, and it was soon discontinued. So once again, these will just kind of look like a small ring K98 in a WZ-29 stock with a large ring receiver adapter on the front, and on the side rail these are typically marked K98-29, K98/29, or W98. So as you can imagine, these conversions are rather rare and command a premium, so definitely keep an eye out for one of those. So for this last variant, I obviously don't have anything here to show you, so I'll admit I'm a little bit out of my comfort zone with this particular one, as I don't really get into German World War II rifles that much. So it is my understanding that after the German occupation of the Radom factory, the German inspectors found the WZ-29 rifle receivers left unfinished in the plant, and they found those to be perfectly acceptable for use by German troops as it met their standards. So several thousand finished and partially finished WZ-29 receivers and parts were captured and taken to Steyr to be finished into K98K style rifles. So these can be found with a 660 code stamped on the receiver, which is the World War II German code for the Steyr plant, with some variation of G.29/40 on the side rail. Now, it's my understanding that only a few thousand of these were made, and they go for crazy prices and often are fake, so buyer beware. So if you want to know more about these, the Mauser World YouTube channel has a pretty good video on these, so I suggest checking that out. Alright, now I figure I should add a little bit of spice to liven up this video, so let's add some controversy here. So ever since Polish Mausers were discussed in Robert Ball's Military Mausers of the World, it has been repeated across many different forms of media that with these Polish WZ-29 rifles, they had this cutout in the side here for all of them. Straight bolts were for infantry, bent bolts were for cavalry, and I guess support troops as well. So from official Polish literature that I've read on these rifles, and discussion with some knowledgeable Polish collectors, both here and in Poland, these WZ-29s were made exclusively with straight bolts, despite having this cutout in the stock for a bent bolt handle. So those Polish researchers have stated that they have not seen any archival documentation or period photographs that show or discuss bent bolts being issued to troops in Poland in the standard military issue. So while there are a small number of examples found, predominantly in the United States in collectors markets that have matching number bolt handles, researchers have seen these and kind of concluded that these were likely reworked by Spain or by the Germans after capture, maybe to make them more K98K-like. So then it becomes, well, why was this cutout over here left on these rifles when they're all going to be issued with straight bolts? Well, I think that, this is kind of a vestigial feature, and this is, not normal to, Polish rifles. Like, for example, early WZ-28 bayonets were manufactured with a flash guard on the grip panels to protect the wood grips from muzzle blast, despite the fact that these bayonets were designed for this WZ-29 rifle and is mounted, far rearward on the rifle, so it's impossible to have muzzle blast issues. The other example is the Polish production of the Vz 35 pistols, which were designed with a slit cut in the back strap for mounting a shoulder stock, despite the fact that only a handful of shoulder stock prototypes were ever made, and really they never made it past the prototype phase. So I'm going to be taking a leap of faith here, but I suspect that at the factory they had these wooden stock the production line set up to make this bolt cutout, kind of similar to the K98, which had that as a standard feature, and it was just too expensive to readjust the machinery to eliminate that step, so they just said, screw it, we're going to make all the stocks with that bolt cutout. So unfortunately it is very tough to verify or confirm this one way or another, since Poland was ravaged by war, by the Nazi invasion and the Soviet liberation afterwards. A lot of these records have been lost to time, so a lot of this stuff is kind of left open to speculation amongst collectors and researchers doing the best that they can with the information at hand. So another thing that caught my attention while researching these rifles was when I was kind of taking a look at the receiver crest markings on these rifles throughout the years. I noticed something peculiar about the K29 rifles of the year 1931, especially when I received this one, this Spanish rework. So I'll get a closer view of this one so I can discuss it a little bit better.
Alright, so I received my Spanish rework of the K29 rifle, this 1931 over here, and when I looked at the crest, something looked a little bit funny, and I thought that perhaps this was a Spanish Civil War like scrub receiver that was fake stamped, because if you take a look at the markings, the font and everything about the stamp looks correct, but if you draw a line right down the middle over here, it's off by just a couple of degrees from like the 12 o'clock position. And what I did is I looked on Google and forum postings online for anyone else that has a 1931 dated WZ-29, and their crest markings also had this kind of offset looking crest. So looks like this might be some sort of fabrication error. Did not notice this on any other years of production, which is strange because I figure this would definitely show up in the first run in the year 1930 when only like 1,000 or so were made. But anyway, it looks like it was corrected after this year. So if anyone else has noticed this anomaly, let me know what your thoughts are. I'd be curious to know what you guys think, or if you know something I don't.
Alright, and additionally I want to touch on Polish Mauser accessories, which really aren't needed to enjoy and collect these rifles, but I always feel that they do enhance a collection and make you appreciate it a whole lot more. So we'll start taking a look at some of the stuff that we have here.
Alright, so I'll start off by talking about the Polish Mauser sling, which you can see here. It is the standard European type where it has the adjustment buckle and a brass kind of set pin at the end to take up the slack and attach it to a sling loop. And it's got a sling keeper over here. I'm going to see if I can get a closer up view, but the texture of the outer edge of this sling is kind of a herringbone type pattern. These slings are very hard to find. I think if you get them loosely, they kind of run anywhere from around $120 to $300. So if you end up
getting a Polish Mauser that does have a sling like this included, that's a pretty big win. Alright, so I have 3 bayonets here that are specifically designed for the WZ-29 rifle. But if you want to know more about the different types and developmental history of Polish Mauser bayonets, you can take a look at the pop-up cards shown over here in the corner of the video. But I'll just quickly kind of summarize these examples here. So what I have here are 2 examples of the WZ-28 bayonet and 1 example of the WZ-29. So all of these incorporate a muzzle ring for stability. This one over here, this is a early Perkun made example. You could tell it's an earlier one because it has, like I mentioned, that vestigial feature of a flash guard over here. Even though when this is fitted to a rifle, there's no way for the muzzle blast to impact the grips. Unfortunately, I can't attach this one to the rifle because the soldier, whoever used this before, kind of beat the pommel over here to oblivion, and it can no longer attach to the bayonet lug of a rifle. Get that out of the way. So this next one here, this is also the WZ-28. This is one that is made by FB. I'll get some better photos up here. So this is a later model that incorporates the simplified design, as it doesn't have the flash guard over here. So FB produced examples tend to be of a higher quality fit and finish than the Perkun versions. So this last example here is the WZ-29, often referred to as the 1939 mobilization model. So starting in 1939, the bayonets were to be updated to be stamped with the year of production over here on the ricasso. These were produced by FB and Perkun. As you can see, it's stamped Perkun Warszawa over here. They get the mobilization name because due to the timing of production near the start of World War II, and obviously since they were only made for 1 year, and what I'll do next is take this bayonet and mount it to one of the rifles just so that you can see what it looks like attached.
Shown here are several boxes of Polish marked 8mm Mauser ammunition that I've acquired over the years. Now this ammo is very collectible, so I don't shoot it, and I have these only for display purposes only. As you can tell, I have them wrapped up in some clear plastic. I think it's really cool that these cartridges have Polish Eagle on the head stamp, and the boxes themselves are quite beautiful as they have a nice label stamped on them with the factory name, location, date, and the national crest. Next, I have 2 Polish marked Mauser pouches. Unfortunately, the stamps on the inside of the pouches are quite faint, and it's kind of hard to get them to pop up on camera, so hopefully you can see the markings here. And you'll have to take my word upon it that these are correctly marked. Shown here are 2 brass Polish Mauser muzzle protectors that were acquired from Poland and were sold to me in relic condition and were frozen shut when I received them. Fortunately for both, the flat spring associated with keeping them open or closed is either missing or completely corroded away. However, soaking them in Croil for a week freed them up, and at this point they're somewhat serviceable and can be mounted and secured on a rifle. These attach by pressing down on the muzzle and twisting them into a retaining notch on the front sight assembly. These can be mounted on the muzzle of a Polish K98 or a WZ-29, as you can see here.
Now, as far as research material goes, you know, obviously there's a lot of help on internet forums, but it also helps to kind of have some text background as well. So the first one I want to talk about, and I brought this up in the K98 video as well, is this Polish book, Karabiny Mauser 98 w Wojsku Polskim. This is a pretty good guide. Obviously, it's in the Polish language, so sorry for anyone that's just strictly English speaking. There's a lot of good period photos, graphics, and historical information. Unfortunately, the shortcoming of this book is they don't really go into a huge amount of detail about the specific, what all the tiny markings mean, what all the proof marks stand for, and all that. So it's still a really good guide that I recommend. For bayonets, I was able to get a copy of this delivered to me from Poland. Obviously, it's Bayonets of the Polish Army, 1918 to 1939, which covers not only Mauser bayonets, but all other different kinds. Like, for example, the Polish ones, or I'm sorry, the bayonets for the Lebel rifle, Austrian rifles, you name it, and it's got some really good illustrations. And one that's probably going to be super common to find in America is Ball's Military Mausers of the World. It's a decent start, or a decent reference book for kind of general knowledge about stuff. It's really watered down because they try to cram as much information in a limited amount of pages as possible. So it's an okay place to start for some reference photos, but I've noticed a lot of the information is kind of outdated at this point. So in conclusion, I hope that this video helped to shed some light on these really cool, interesting historic rifles, and I hope that I'm able to get some future collectors make some educated purchasing decisions if you're in the market for something like this. So thanks for sticking around to the end of this quite long video, and happy collecting. Good luck. Now, as far